All right, today we're going to tackle a topic that gets talked about a lot, but often in all the wrong ways. We're going to dive into the crisis of child marriage in Pakistan, but we're going to reframe it, move it way beyond the usual headlines to see what's actually at stake for the future of the entire country. So let's start by dismantling the biggest misconception right out of the gate.
Okay, so first things first, and this is probably the most important point to get right away. The conversation around child marriage in Pakistan is so often framed as a religious one. But as you're about to see, that completely misses the point, and honestly, it distracts from the real devastating crisis that's unfolding.
This quote from Zofine Ibrahim in Dawn just nails it. It gets right to the heart of the matter. This isn't about theology, it's about the basic functions of a state. It's about whether a country can actually protect its own citizens, its own future. And once you grasp that single idea, it changes everything about how you see this problem.
And here's why that matters so much. When certain political actors try to drag this issue back into a religious argument, they're doing something incredibly dangerous. They're not just having a debate. They are actively chipping away at the state's authority on an issue that has, for all intents and purposes, already been legally settled. And that creates chaos where there really should be clarity.
So if this is a governance issue, just how big is it? Well, the scale of who is affected is, well, it's pretty staggering. And it puts the stakes into a much, much clearer perspective.
Just let that number sink in for a second. 40%. That is the percentage of Pakistan's entire population that is under the age of 18.
And what does 40% actually look like? Well, it looks like this. Roughly 112 million children. So we are not talking about a niche issue here. We're talking about a huge chunk of the country's future.
You know, when you have 112 million children whose futures are hanging in the balance, this is no longer just a collection of private family matters. It becomes a population-level crisis, a crisis of human capital. And frankly, it's a national security risk. The health, the education, the well-being of this group will literally define the country's stability for decades.
And this is where we see the domino effect in action. See, child marriage isn't some standalone problem that exists in a vacuum. No, it's the first domino. And once it falls, it triggers a chain reaction, toppling crises in education, in health, and right through the economy.
Let's start with education. The first domino. An absolutely staggering 38% of school-aged children in Pakistan are not in school. Think about that. That's almost 2 out of every 5 kids locked out of a future from the very beginning.
But even that huge number doesn't tell the whole story. The details underneath are just devastating. We're talking about 26 million kids out of school. And look at this point right here. 79% of them have never even stepped foot inside a classroom. For girls, early marriage is one of the biggest reasons why, and it locks the poorest families into a cycle of poverty that can last for generations.
So that education domino falls, and it slams right into a national health crisis. Just look at these numbers from the Pakistan Demographic and Health Survey. Over 18% of girls are married before they're even adults, and for nearly 4%, it happens before they're 15. And what's the result? 1 in 5 of these young girls gets pregnant almost immediately. Their bodies just aren't ready. Over half are already anemic, which sets them up for incredibly dangerous, high-risk pregnancies right from the start.
And this is where you really see that vicious cycle in action. Young, often malnourished mothers are giving birth to underweight newborns. And this feeds directly into Pakistan's massive malnutrition crisis. You've got 40% of children under 5 who are stunted. Their growth is permanently damaged. This isn't just a health problem. It fundamentally weakens the entire country's future workforce.
And the damage doesn't stop with childbirth. Not even close. We see a lifetime of consequences. Girls who are married early face a much higher risk of chronic diseases, severe mental trauma, and they're often trapped in a state of dependency, which just adds to wider social instability.
So, with all this absolutely devastating impact, you would think the law would be ironclad, right? Well, here's the paradox. At the very heart of this crisis, there's a law in the books, but it doesn't have the teeth to actually protect anyone. Now this right here, this fact should have been the end of the debate, period. In 2021, the highest religious court in the country, the Federal Sharia Court, made its ruling, and it stated clearly that it is perfectly fine under Islamic principles for a government to set a minimum age for marriage. The legal and religious question is settled. So, that brings us to the million-dollar question, doesn't it?
If the country's top religious court has already given its verdict on this, why in the world are we still seeing political figures openly threatening to defy the law? What is really going on here?
Well, the answer is all about fragmented enforcement. This table makes the problem crystal clear. You have provinces like Sin that have taken a strong stance, criminalizing child marriage and setting the age at 18. But then you have others lagging behind at 16, or with laws that are just stuck, pending. This patchwork creates what are essentially legal safe havens, where people can just cross a provincial border to get around the law.
And that's the bottom line here. Without one single uniform minimum age of 18 for everyone across the entire country, any progress at the provincial level is mostly symbolic. It's a loophole big enough to drive a truck through, and it makes any real, consistent enforcement basically impossible.
Okay, so let's tie all these threads together. When you stop looking at child marriage as a cultural issue and start seeing it for what it is, a governance issue, you realize it acts like a multiplier. It takes every other national crisis and just makes it worse.
So what you have to understand is that this political debate isn't really about religion or tradition. It's a strategic diversion. It's a way to pull everyone's attention away from the state's failure to fix the collapsing education system, the child nutrition crisis, and staggering economic inequality. And at the exact same time, it actively undermines the authority of the courts and eats away at public trust in institutions.
So let's just put it all side by side. The entire point of this explainer was to reframe this issue. On the left, you've got the wrong frame, seeing this as just a religious squabble or a private family matter. But the real frame, the one that's backed up by all the data, shows it for what it truly is: a core governance failure, a direct threat to national resilience, and a massive barrier to economic stability.
And that leaves us with this final thought. In the end, this isn't a debate about the past or about tradition. It is a choice about the future. It's a question of whether a nation is willing to invest in and to protect the incredible potential of its 112 million children, or to betray it.